It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited to be with you today. As I always am, I've got a great episode in store for you. I'm sitting here in front of Kaitlyn Fondano, and Kaitlyn she works with Specialized Real Estate Group, and I got introduced to her by another friend on LinkedIn. You know how people on LinkedIn reach out to you all the time, but shout out to Devin Britton for reaching out. He is a longtime listener of the podcast, and I really appreciate him connecting me to Kaitlyn. And Kaitlyn is actually part of an organization that is near and dear to my heart, and that's the Urban Land Institute. And she is the director of the Young Leaders Group, which is YLG, as the cool kids call it, is a program that the Urban Land Institute puts on to basically foster and grow leaders in the land planning space, if you will, from all walks of life and all careers. And so I thought it would be great to have her come on because, you know, one of the things that we talk about here in Northwest Arkansas is we're trying to be intentional about placemaking. We're trying to create an area that we want our kids to live in, that we want our grandkids to be a part of. We want to be able to look back in 30, 40, 50 years and say, wow, look at what we created. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens with will. It happens with determination. It happens with hard work. It happens with relationship building. And it happens with programs like the Young Leaders Group, where minds are molded and ideas are exchanged in an area that is just continuing to grow so fast that every time you blink, there is something else that has changed in this area. Am I overstating it, Kaitlyn?
No, I mean, that's exactly right. And I think that's why groups like this have been identified as really pivotal to Northwest Arkansas to make sure that that knowledge and responsibility is being passed down generationally as opposed to the current leaders in our region.
No, without a doubt. So, and so I'm glad you're here today because, again, this continues a conversation that I have been having over and over again. I've been doing some programs with the Northwest Arkansas Council. They have the Future is Now speaker series with Duke McClarty and Isabel Gamara and the rest of the great folks at the Northwest Arkansas Council. And, you know, we're talking about all kinds of factors that play into how you grow an area, from affordable housing to placemaking to specifically creating job opportunities. I mean, there are a number of things that play into that. And so what you guys are doing with the Young Leaders Group, I think, is really important, and people need to be made aware of it. And so this is a podcast episode where you're going to learn a lot about the Young Leaders Group, and we're going to talk a little bit about ULI. But before we get into that, we certainly want to introduce our guest today on the podcast. So, Kaitlyn, as we always do, and I know you've listened to the podcast before, I would love for you to share your superhero origin story. You can go back as far as you want, but just give us the Cliff Note version of who you are and what brought you to Northwest Arkansas.
Sure. So originally born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. I went to school there studying construction management at Arizona State, but really got introduced to the world of construction. And although it was really only introductory back then, got my kind of start in the sticks and bricks of things working with Habitat for Humanity.
Okay.
And that's a group I participated at from a very young age with my father and participated with for well over 14 years. And that was 35 plus weeks a year building homes with father and friends and kind of understanding how communities were shaped. And so that led to an interest in construction management and completed that program again at Arizona State, which put me into a role with a general contractor, DPR Construction, who I worked for both in Phoenix and in Los Angeles up until the point that I decided I kind of needed to make transition in my career and went back to school at that point into the real estate development program. It's a master's program again at Arizona State University, and used that as kind of the pivoting point in making the transition into development. And so began a career after that program in real estate development, working for a small scale adaptive reuse developer in the Phoenix area. And then shortly after my husband and I got married, we very quickly realized that we wanted to raise a family in a place that really felt like home to us, that had a community that we could be a part of and that we could see value in what it would bring opportunities for us and family alike. And so made the decision to move to Northwest Arkansas, which is a place that I had family from. Grandparents lived here, uncle lived here, parents and sisters at that point had all moved here themselves. So I was the last man standing in Phoenix, as it were. And family was important to us, as was quality of life. And obviously, Northwest Arkansas fit that bill perfectly. And so even through the program we're talking about today, ULI connected me with the company I now work for, a specialized real estate group. And that was kind of the pivot point, if you will, of us moving to Northwest Arkansas and beginning where we're at here today.
Very cool. I like that. And so you were the last woman standing in Arizona. And, the ironic thing about that is that a lot of people have relocated to the Phoenix area. And so for a number of reasons, I mean, there are Californians that have relocated there, and some people relocate there for the weather. It's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat.
And we advertise ourselves as a dried out version of California.
Right. Right.
Someday California will break away and there'll be beachfront property, as we all know, in Arizona. But yes, many people are traveling there. And I mean, you can imagine the change of perspective moving from a city who at that point in time had well over 3 times the population as a city of Arkansas as a whole. And so the transition that brought with us. But my husband grew up in a small town, Lake Havasu, in Arizona.
I know where that is.
And so it was familiar for him. And to us, it was really an opportunity to be a part of a community, to have a place that we can make a difference in the work that we were doing, and an opportunity where our kids could play on the street. We could go to the market. We could go to the farmer's market, as we did this weekend, and see people that we knew. And so we've gotten exactly what we were looking for.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So, well, we're certainly glad you're here, and we're glad that you are making this home, right? And I think that's the interesting part to it, is that you guys got here and you didn't really let any grass grow under your feet. You just dug right in and got involved. And I think that's really cool. Can you tell us just a little bit about Specialized Real Estate Group and the work that you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. So my role with Specialized Real Estate is I'm the Director of Development. And so in that, overseeing the development and construction projects that we're participating in. And we are a real estate developer with really a commitment to building healthy places and healthy spaces throughout Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
And so the bread and butter of what we build would be multifamily communities. And there's examples of those in our Brick Avenue projects in Bentonville, in the South Yard Lofts that we're under construction on in South Fayetteville. And then really the placemaking that we find to bring those projects together and kind of make them complete. And that includes the commercial developments of South Yard as really the most recent example of that. And so we bring health into our projects in a number of ways, including the building form and function, but also in how the spaces are designed, how the spaces between the buildings are designed, and really try to take a holistic approach. And we both develop and manage our properties, which is given us kind of the unique position to make long-term decisions that are best for those properties and the residents who are going to be dependent on them as their homes. And so we've been doing that in, as I said, a number of projects throughout Northwest Arkansas.
So remind me, the South Yard Lofts, are those the ones that are like right below the library?
No, that would be Integrity's net zero project.
Okay, that's what that is. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So we are just at South School and MLK.
Okay.
So if you can imagine, right behind Vaughn Battery.
Yes, I know where that is. Okay, perfect. So South School and MLK.
And it's the network building is what you're referring to across from the library.
Yeah, I know where that is. So, okay, cool. So obviously you've been here for a couple of years now. I think you said you and your husband got here in 2019. You did buy some property and started rehabbing a place, and then the pandemic happened, and then some kids came along, and all kinds of interesting things have happened. And now you find yourself overseeing or running this young leaders group. Tell us a little bit about this group and what you're hoping to see happen here in Northwest Arkansas with this group. Oh, and by the way, you are a 40 under 40 as well. So we want to, that's not a light accolade. That's a big deal. And so I want to congratulate you for being bestowed with that honor. So.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that. And yes, it is quite an honor and unexpected, no doubt. But I'm very excited that was bestowed upon me. and to be in part of that collection of people. So,
well, I mean, it is a bestowing because like people have to say, hey, this person is, it's not like you raise your hand and be like, hey, consider me. It's like people are like, no, this young lady is legit and she's doing her thing. So I think that's exciting.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes, it was a very exciting opportunity. And one my husband is now since very jealous of. So that's even more.
Well, there you go. You got that over him. So
exactly.
There you go.
Yes.
Awesome.
Anything to keep rank in the household.
Yes. Yeah. You could just call him Mr. 40 under 40.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's only got a few years left to qualify himself. So he needs to get to work.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen. We're holding out hope for you, my man. So yeah, no, tell us a little bit about the Young Leaders Group and why people should care about this particular group and potentially get involved.
Sure. No, and I appreciate you having me on, obviously, to kind of help spread the message specific to this. And so, as you mentioned, ULI as a whole has a mission of kind of shaping and informing the built environment and the future of the communities in which they're within, including Northwest Arkansas. But the Young Leaders Group specifically is an affinity group of ULI Northwest Arkansas that is targeting those under the age of 35 with the mission to really help develop the next generation of leaders in Northwest Arkansas. We're supported by our members and volunteers who are all within different disciplines, and that includes myself in the development side, financing, architecture, really any of the components that you imagine affect land use. And that extends into even marketing, plan and engineering. The list is really quite extensive when you get into it. And so the intent is really that we harness the power of the group of individuals that qualify and that they bring a unique perspective to this market just based upon where they are in their careers. And I don't know that they're necessarily able to leverage that in their individual opportunities. But if you kind of consider the collective power of the group as a whole, that we can put that all to good use. And so young leaders kind of specifically are uniquely equipped to approach problems differently just based upon where they are. And that includes technology, emerging trends, the way that young leaders specifically can consume and kind of leverage technology. I think, as we know, with all things happening, AI included, will really be pivotal.
What's AI?
Exactly. I'm still trying to Google that myself.
It's all good.
No one knows. That's the real answer.
Right.
But I think it makes the perspective that they have unique and their voice quite powerful just because of the influence that they individually can have. And so what we're trying to do is really capture that talent and give them a place to network both amongst themselves and then with the larger both ULI and Northwest Arkansas community. And that's being done through the ULI YLG group.
Wow. So that's exciting. And I'm glad you stated it the way that you did because it actually lines up perfectly with a lot of advice that I give to companies when I come in to talk to them about leadership and also about the generational differences that exist within an organization and how, if I'm a Gen X. So, my thing is, how do I harness millennials? How do I harness the power from a Gen Z, right? And these digital natives that basically come out of the womb sending text messages and Snapchats and all this other good stuff. And, this idea is that, each successive generation that comes out is going to do even greater things in the generation before it. And they're going to be able to leverage those tools and skill sets that are native to them. And I think it's important to have a safe place where that can happen. And also with the Young Leaders Group, what I hear you saying is that you guys provide a framework through which all of these talented individuals that come together, you hear the expression, you can go far by yourself, but you can go together, you can go much further. And so when you're able to bring people together and kind of give them an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, say, for instance, in Northwest Arkansas, as we continue to grow, 500,000 people now, going to be 1 million people by 2040, 2045, depending on whose numbers you believe. A lot's going to happen over the next, and again, I don't like to do public math, but over the next 23, 24 years. It's just, so it's going to be, is everybody it's all hands on deck to make this happen. And so a program like YLG, I think is a really important program to be a part of. And you stated it very clearly. These individuals are coming from a lot of different career sets, marketing. You talked about architects and engineers, students even from that perspective, right? And so there are plenty of opportunities for people to get involved in a program like this. And you don't have to be conferred upon with a specific degree or something like that to get involved with the Young Leaders Group.
That's correct. And I appreciate you mentioning that because, I mean, if you have an interest in land use, if you have an interest in how communities are built, an interest in real estate, and most people, I think, kind of say, well, real estate development is what it is. And perhaps I'm not directly related to that. But I mean, the list of disciplines that actually play a role in any of these buildings that get brought out of the ground is extensive. And each of those, I mean, has a voice within the community. And I think YLG specifically provides them the forum to bring that knowledge. And the voice of many is obviously stronger than any individual, and for good reason. And so the idea that we can kind of bring these people together, curate conversations specific to where they are at in their career, bring them opportunities to advance or be mentored specific to that, the roles that they're currently in, and then harnessing that information to both influence and inform, really. And so I think we are very much in our infancy as a program. This is the inaugural year that we're currently in. But I think it's really powerful what we have the opportunity to do. And a group such as ours in a community such as Northwest Arkansas is really set to be more powerful than it may be even in other cities. Just because, as you mentioned, so much development is happening here and so quickly versus larger metropolis areas where it's pretty well established,
well,
perhaps
mature.
Status quo.
Yeah,
Correct.
They're mature. I mean, and I mean, I feel like here, every time I turn around, there's something new. Like even what you were describing, that net zero project there right below the library. I mean, just a couple of years ago, that wasn't even there. Matter of fact, just a couple of years ago, most of the land south of the library, there was not a lot over there. And so I just marvel. I've only been here 8 years. I feel like I've been here for forever, but 8 years, I've seen a lot of change. And so you can only imagine what it's going to be like over the next 5 to 10. And being a part of a group like the Young Leaders Group, I think is important because you will, it's like a lot of times we say, hey, put me in, coach. I want to do something. This is the opportunity for you to do something right now. Not like, well, we'll wait till you're seasoned and a little bit more mature and all this. No, you can get thrown right into the mix instantly. And I believe that's what YLG will offer from an experiential standpoint for young professionals that have an interest in placemaking, have an interest in, being a part of how this area grows.
No, I think that's fair. And I mean, my goal and kind of vision for what YLG can become is almost an accelerator.
Yeah.
So you have a dynamic group of young professionals who are all coming from different facets and different fields. But if that group can collectively become an accelerator for change as they see appropriate within the roles that they're playing, then what a fantastic opportunity we've created. Not only for our community to harness and leverage the information that comes out of that group, but also for the individuals who are able to participate.
Yeah. Now, that's exciting. I got goosebumps thinking about it because I know what the ULI is capable of. I've been affiliated in or involved with ULI since the late 90s. And so I know I don't look that old, but I mean, I've been around doing this for a while, but I've always been impressed with the Urban Land Institute's approach to things, approach to education, approach to policy. And they're, having an organization like ULI NWA here in this area is really important. And so this is just another spoke off of that hub that is ULI Northwest Arkansas. And it's going to be an important spoke.
It is. And I think there are multiple spokes, as you mentioned, in the READY program that you recently featured, WLI, which is the Women's Leadership Initiative, and then Young Leaders Group now being the third. And I mean, collectively, each of those programs have their own targets, but we're working within the umbrella of ULI, which has a much larger mission, as you mentioned. And so we get the benefit of the support, the resource, the really experience of the larger ULI network, and are able to put it in a community such as Northwest Arkansas where it can be really influential, I think, if done correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I like hearing stories like that. And it's great to see a program like this, get off the ground. How does one get involved with the Young Leaders Group? And I imagine somebody's listening to this. They're a young engineer, just fresh year out of school. Maybe they're working at McClellan. Maybe they're working at Craft & Tull or Olson or fill in the blank, any of the design firms that are here locally in Northwest Arkansas. Or maybe they are a design professional from another part of the country thinking about moving here the way you and your husband did a couple of years ago. How do they get involved with this program?
So most directly would be obviously becoming a member of ULI. And YLG members get the benefit of membership at 50%, which is helpful.
Yeah, that is
and a
helpful.
monthly payment plan, which is less than you'll pay for your phone bill each month.
Sure.
So that's the kind of most direct route, but certainly becoming aware and a follower of the social media platforms we're on so that you can participate in many of the events that we put on. And our goal for the year has been to hold 2 events within each quarter, and we're going to well exceed that this year.
Okay.
Our events are really, there's a number of kind of categories that we've qualified them in, and they include networking events, which are happy hours, social events, kind of the standard events, especially popular with young leader type individuals. And then we have our impact events. And so those are community events, basically, where we're volunteering as a collective group for one of the nonprofit organizations within this area. And so participating in one of those and using that as an opportunity to kind of meet individuals within the Young Leader Network. We also have the content series, which is, those may be site tours, those may be hosted events with a curated speaker to facilitate a discussion specific to an issue, either affecting Northwest Arkansas or land use as a whole. And so, I mean, I think participation is the best way to become involved, and that it means inquiring about and finding a way to join us in one of our upcoming events.
Yeah, it's like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. So
you can't win if you don't play.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, that's exciting. And I know a couple of the events that you guys are going to do, and these may be events that happen with some regularity, is the Curate a Conversation, and then the Pechuca. Thank you. I'm sorry. I've ruined that. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, you're like, this dude just totally butchered that. But I've heard it said a million times, and I'm usually good with pronouncing and things. But yeah, Pechuca got the best of me. So, but just tell us a little bit about both of those events. So if anybody sees this listed online or on social media, and you see YLG or the Young Leaders Group with ULI, and you see Curate a Conversation mentioned or a Pechuca, you know, this is something that you could participate in. But just real quickly, just tell us a little bit about both of those programs.
Sure. So Curated Conversations is a series we're hoping to hold at least twice a year. It's best defined as speed networking. And so it gives an opportunity for mentees, which are members. At that point, it's a member-only event, mentees to go roundtable with who we've identified as kind of leaders in our community. And that can include presidents or partners of any of the firms that, again, have a role in land use and development. And so it's a series where they really get to spend 10 minutes asking questions, gaining insight, perspective, however they wish to use that. And it's meant to be an intro to those individuals, not necessarily a mentorship at that point in time, but hopefully a launching point to creating conversations to follow up with those that they've kind of had impactful conversations with. So that being the curated conversations. The Pechuca is somewhat opposite of that. It is open to all from an audience perspective, but the format will be a call to participate from those that are eligible in the YLG kind of member bracket to basically present to a larger audience. And that would be the audience of anywhere from public to anyone who's just interested in ULI. And I think it offers a really unique opportunity for young leaders to both present and really speak in front of a group of leaders or peers alike on lessons learned, on projects, on really just anything that they may be interested in. So that'll be happening hopefully with some regularity in the programming as well.
Now, the format with that, with the Pechuca is 6 minutes and 20 slides. Is that, I know there's some kind of format that goes along with it. And I can never remember exactly. The bottom line is why that format of presentation is so important is because it helps you to distill your thoughts and ideas down to the most important things that you want to share. You know, a lot of times, and I do a lot of presentations, and I'm constantly using 30-point font and no bullet points or anything like that because I use mostly images, and I talk about themes and ideas because when we watch presentations, we don't remember a lot of data and information like that. We don't process it that way. So if you can then change and turn your presentations into more storyboard form, you'll have a much better chance of landing with those in the audience and getting your point across more effectively. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And we may both get criticized for not knowing name or format exactly correctly, but I believe it's 20 slides, 20 seconds.
That's what it is.
And
Yeah.
we'll get it right by the time it happens, I promise. 20 seconds, 20 slides. And as you said, I mean, you need to practice. You can't just pull it off without the whim, or off the whim, if you will. But it is a difficult form of presentation, but it makes for a very exciting presentation to be an audience member of. You have to get your content across very clearly. You have to be concise in your thoughts, and you have to have a good story, because if you miss it, if you forget, if you stumble, the slides moved on and you have to catch up. And so I think it's an engaging format that should be quite an exciting event for us to put on. And I think hopefully provides some really interesting experiences for our young leader group.
Absolutely. Because no one has ever said, I wish that presentation was a 5 minutes longer. Yes. No one ever said that. So no, I think that's great. So hopefully people will be able to participate in this, whether in the audience or as a brave soul that comes up front and actually does that. So I think that's going to be exciting. Well, great. So I appreciate you just taking time to educate our audience about the Young Leaders Group with ULI Northwest Arkansas. Again, this is a group that has peer programs around the country. And so this is not something that was just created out of, thin air. This has had practice and has had success. Our goal is to try to see that replicated here in Northwest Arkansas. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, it's a volunteer-based organization, as ULI is generally as a whole.
Which always amazes me when I think about it, because everybody's so hyped on ULI, and it truly is a volunteer thing. I mean, you either all in or you're not. And most of the people that I run across that are involved with ULI stuff, they're just all in, and they look at placemaking as a part of who they are. I look at it that way. I mean, honestly, this podcast is a form of placemaking, right? Because I'm trying to speak what I want to see happen here in Northwest Arkansas by virtue of the people that I hope I attract here with this podcast, by the stories that I tell about the great things that are happening that we'd like to see amplified. That's just part of it. So this is my way of being involved in that.
Sure. And I think if we all want as great of a community as we believe we live in today to continue, then I think we have somewhat of a responsibility to participate in it.
Yeah.
And so yourself and podcast, my role in the Young Leaders Group as I am now, I think it's each of us kind of fulfilling that responsibility in one way or the other. And so now we're just trying to harness the power kind of collectively as a group. But I think you made a good point. I mean, it's a volunteer organization that seems to do well above its weight class in caliber of events and quality of content. And I hope that that's something people see in both the kind of work of the district council as a whole, but also in the affinity groups such as YLG.
Yeah, well, and that's all you can ask for, right? I mean, and certainly if you can punch above your weight, that's always a good thing. So, well, Kaitlyn, best point of contact for the Young Leaders Group, for you, so that anybody listening to this is yo, I want to be a part of this. Or somebody that might say, hey, I'd like to be a mentor to one of these young people that is coming through this program, and I feel like I have something to share with them. How can people get involved and get in contact?
Yeah, so the most direct way would be through the ULI Northwest Arkansas website.
Okay.
Or certainly connecting with me directly. My role is the committee chair runs through mid-next year. And so I've got just about another year left myself.
Okay.
But I am happy to have any and all of those conversations. And I think your point that there is an opportunity and really a call for participation, including both those who are eligible to be members themselves, but also companies within this area that are supportive of our mission. And that could be, of course, sponsorship. We'll always take those opportunities, but more so in the investment of time as a mentor, perhaps people being, if you could promote kind of within your company, the participation of those individuals qualified as YLG members themselves and encourage them to do so, as I often find that they may not think that they have the authority to kind of join or can make it a priority within their company or time to do so. And then also, I mean, programs, if you're working on something great and would like to have it featured as one of our site tours or content series, please reach out and let us know that information. Yeah.
I mean, I can see anybody listening to this leveraging the Young Leaders Group for a number of different reasons, right? I mean, imagine all the stakeholders that would be participating in this program and how you could interact with them. And, a lot of times, we're constantly sending out blind messages to people on LinkedIn and what have you. But imagine being able to connect with somebody that you actually know. Makes a huge difference. And a program like the Young Leaders Group can help you kind of with some of those introductions, can help you with just getting over the uncomfortableness of public presentation, of just kind of being out there, right? I mean, people would rather die than present publicly. I mean, let's just face it. So it's like this is a chance for you to kind of get out of your shell and get a little uncomfortable while building some new relationships and making some new friends.
You're right. I mean, you have the benefit of being in a group of peers at a majority of our events, and whether it be some of the networking or more social ones, creating kind of the foundation of the relationship and then being able to leverage that. So if you're participating as a presenter in Pechakucha, you're speaking to an audience with a few friends in it and a few familiar faces. Yeah.
Well, listen, I hope all of you listening get involved. And Kaitlyn, thank you so much for spending some time with us today here at the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I really appreciate the work that you're putting in. Like, you're just 4 years into being here in Northwest Arkansas, and you're making a difference on many levels. But I appreciate you, bringing this program between you and Mr. Britton, bringing this to my attention so that we could feature it on the podcast, because it is something that is important to me. And hopefully we'll get a couple of new participants that have listened to this and have said, hey, I want to be a part of what you guys are doing. And what would make it even sweeter is if somebody that's in another part of the country thinking about relocating here and saying, yeah, I'm going to relocate here, and one of the first things I'm going to do is get involved with the Young Leaders Group. So I think that's awesome. And we'll make sure all of your contact information, I'll even put your LinkedIn profile in our show notes so that people can connect with you offline and learn more about what you're doing. But Kaitlyn Fondano, thank you so much for meeting with us and just sharing with us a little bit about what you're doing at Young Leaders Group. We wish you nothing but continued success at Specialized Real Estate Group. And maybe we'll have to have you on one day to talk about some of the unique projects that you're working on there as well, because I'm fully familiar with your organization. I think you guys are doing some interesting work, and it's one of those things where we know that we're going to have to build more affordable housing here. We're going to have to build, there's a lot of infill that's going to need to take place. We're going to have to be smart about how we do it so that we're not using our space indiscriminately, because as you know, they're not building any more land. So we have to be judicious with what we have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. That's another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast, sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Be sure to sign up today. You can also subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.